The sun was just beginning to rise over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The city was waking up, its streets slowly coming alive with the hum of traffic and the chatter of early risers. Dr. Evelyn Carter tightened her scarf against the crisp autumn air as she made her way to her car. She had spent the last 12 hours saving lives at St. Vincent's Hospital, where she worked as one of the most skilled surgeons on staff. Despite her success, Evelyn often felt like she was walking a tightrope, balancing her professional achievements with the reality of being a black woman in America. As she approached her sleek black sedan parked under a flickering street lamp, Evelyn noticed two figures standing nearby. At first glance, they looked like ordinary pedestrians, but something about their posture made her pause. Before she could unlock her car door, the sound of heavy boots crunching against gravel caught her attention. Turning around, she saw two police officers striding toward her, their expressions stern. One of them, a tall man with a square jaw and an air of authority, stepped forward while his partner lingered slightly behind. "Ma'am, can we have a word?" the taller officer asked, his tone clipped and unwelcoming. Evelyn blinked, taken aback by the sudden intrusion into her otherwise peaceful morning. "Of course," she replied calmly, though unease prickled at the edges of her mind. "Is there a problem?" The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her face, his eyes narrowing as if trying to match her features to some mental image. Finally, he spoke. "We're looking for someone matching your description. There's been a report of a theft nearby, and you fit the suspect profile." Evelyn's heart sank. This wasn't the first time she'd heard those words. Over the years, she'd grown accustomed to being stopped or questioned because of how she looked, not because of anything she'd done. But this time felt different. Something about the way the officer looked at her sent a chill down her spine. His gaze wasn't curious. It was accusatory. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, keeping her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. "I think there's been a mistake. I'm a doctor at St. Vincent's Hospital. I've been working all night." She reached into her bag, pulling out her hospital ID badge to show him. "You can call a hospital if you need confirmation." But the officer barely glanced at the badge. Instead, he smirked, his lips curling into a sneer that made Evelyn's blood run cold. "A doctor, huh? That's convenient. Everyone knows doctors don't drive nice cars like this." He gestured dismissively toward her sedan, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Why don't you come with us to the station so we can sort this out?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her mind racing. She wanted to argue, to demand respect, but experience had taught her that confrontation rarely ended well in situations like this. Still, she couldn't help feeling the surge of anger bubbling beneath the surface. How dare they assume she was guilty without even hearing her side of the story? What gave them the right to treat her like a criminal? As the seconds ticked by, Evelyn realized this wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been judged not by their actions, but by the color of their skin. And deep down, she knew this moment would stay with her forever, whether she liked it or not. Evelyn stood rooted to the spot, her hospital ID still clutched in her hand. The chill in the air seemed to deepen as Officer Greg Lawson crossed his arms, his stance unyielding. His partner, Officer Marks, lingered a few steps behind, his expression unreadable but tinged with discomfort. Evelyn took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed. She knew losing her temper wouldn't help, but the injustice of the situation burned inside her like a slow fire. "Officer," she began again, her voice measured but firm, "I've already shown you my identification. I'm not who you're looking for. You can verify this easily by calling the hospital. They'll confirm that I've been on duty all night." Lawson's smirk widened, and he tilted his head as if amused by her persistence. "Sure, we could do that," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "But let's be honest, anyone can fake an ID these days. For all we know, you stole that badge too." Evelyn's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she considered walking away altogether. But she knew better. Running would only give him more reason to chase her or worse, escalate things further. Instead, she planted her feet firmly on the ground and met his gaze head-on. "If you just take a minute to check, you'd see I'm telling the truth," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Marks shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Lawson and Evelyn. "Greg, maybe we should." He started, but Lawson cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Stay out of it, Marks," he snapped, his eyes never leaving Evelyn. "People like her always have something to hide. It's our job to find out what that is." The words hit Evelyn like a punch to the gut. People like her. The phrase echoed in her mind, stirring memories of other times when she'd been judged before being heard. Times when store clerks followed her through aisles, assuming she might steal something. Times when colleagues questioned whether she truly earned her place at the hospital or if it was handed to her because of diversity quotas. Each instance chipped away at her patience, but she had learned to swallow her pride and keep moving forward. Today, however, felt different. This wasn't just suspicion, it was outright hostility. "You don't even know me," Evelyn said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that surprised even herself. "You haven't asked a single question beyond accusing me of being someone I'm not. Do you treat everyone this way, or is it reserved for people who look like me?" Lawson's face hardened, and he stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Listen, lady," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "I don't care about your sob story. All I care about is doing my job. And right now, that means taking you in for questioning. So either come willingly, or we'll make this a lot harder than it needs to be." For a split second, Evelyn considered resisting, not violently, but enough to assert her rights. But she quickly realized that wouldn't end well. Arguing with someone so determined to see her as guilty would only dig her deeper into trouble. Reluctantly, she nodded, her shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But you'll regret this." As Lawson cuffed her hands behind her back, a move that felt unnecessarily aggressive given the circumstances, Marks finally spoke up. "Greg, are you sure this is necessary?" he asked, his tone hesitant. "She hasn't done anything wrong yet." Lawson shot him a glare over his shoulder. "She fits the description, Marks. That's all that matters." He turned back to Evelyn, his grip tightening around her arm, as he guided her toward the patrol car. "Besides, if she's innocent, she's got nothing to worry about. Right?" Evelyn didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was racing, trying to process how quickly her quiet morning had spiraled into chaos. As she slid into the back seat of the cruiser, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into her wrists, she stared out the window at the city she loved. Chicago had always been her home, a place where she dreamed big and worked hard to achieve her goals. But in this moment, it felt like a stranger, a place where justice seemed out of reach for people like her. As the car pulled away from the curb, Evelyn resolved one thing. No matter what happened next, she wouldn't let this moment define her. If anything, it would fuel her determination to fight for change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. Back at St. Vincent's Hospital, the staff was just starting their morning rounds when whispers of what had happened began to spread like wildfire. Nurses huddled in small groups near the nurses' station, exchanging worried glances as they pieced together fragments of information. Word had gotten out that Dr. Evelyn Carter, kind, brilliant, and always calm under pressure, had been taken into custody by the police. At first, many refused to believe it. How could someone as respected and accomplished as Evelyn end up in such a situation? But as more details emerged, disbelief turned into outrage. Sarah Thompson, one of Evelyn's closest colleagues and a fellow surgeon, couldn't shake the image of her friend being led away in handcuffs. "It's absurd," she muttered to herself as she paced the hallway, clutching her phone tightly. "Evelyn has saved countless lives here. She's practically the backbone of this department. Whoever accused her clearly has no idea who they're dealing with." Determined to act, Sarah dialed the hospital administrator, Mr. Alan Peterson, who was known for his no-nonsense approach to protecting the institution's reputation and its people. When he picked up, Sarah didn't mince words. "Alan, you need to hear this," she said urgently. "Dr. Carter was arrested this morning outside the hospital. It sounds like racial profiling, plain and simple. We can't let this slide." Peterson listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with each word. He knew Evelyn well, not only as an exceptional doctor, but also as someone who carried herself with grace and professionalism, even in the most stressful situations. The thought of her being treated like a criminal made his blood boil. Without hesitation, he hung up the phone and immediately called the Chicago Police Department's chief of operations. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Evelyn sat alone in a cold, dimly lit holding cell. Her hands were free now, but the emotional weight of the morning pressed heavily on her shoulders. She stared at the cracked linoleum floor, replaying every detail of the encounter in her mind. Officer Lawson's sneering remarks echoed in her ears, mingling with the dull hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Despite everything, Evelyn refused to cry or show weakness. She reminded herself that tears wouldn't solve anything. They never had before. As the hours dragged on, Evelyn found herself reflecting on her family, particularly her father, Marcus Carter. Growing up, she'd watched him fight tirelessly for justice, taking on cases that others deemed hopeless. His work as a civil rights attorney had earned him both admiration and enemies, but he never backed down. Evelyn often joked that she inherited her resilience from him, though she preferred solving problems with a scalpel rather than a courtroom argument. Still, she knew her father would see this incident not as a personal attack, but as part of a larger systemic issue, one that required action, not silence. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, her father was already mobilizing. By mid-morning, news of her arrest had reached him through a concerned neighbor who saw the story circulating online. Marcus wasted no time. He grabbed his briefcase and headed straight to his office, where he began gathering evidence and drafting legal documents. Years of experience told him this wasn't just about Evelyn. It was about sending a message. If the police department thought they could target someone like her without consequences, they were sorely mistaken. But Evelyn had another ally she hadn't anticipated: social media. A bystander who witnessed the confrontation earlier that morning had recorded a video of the exchange between Evelyn and the officers. Though shaky and grainy, the footage captured enough to spark outrage when it surfaced online. Within hours, hashtags like #JusticeForEvelyn and #EndRacialProfiling began trending across platforms. People shared stories of similar experiences, flooding comment sections with messages of support for Evelyn and calls for accountability. By late afternoon, the story had gained traction beyond social media. Local news outlets picked it up, airing segments that highlighted Evelyn's achievements alongside clips of the viral video. Protesters began gathering outside the precinct, holding signs that read "Believe Black Women" and "No Justice, No Peace." The growing public outcry put immense pressure on the police department to address the situation, and fast. As Evelyn sat silently in her cell, unaware of the storm brewing outside, she focused on one thing: staying strong. Whatever came next, she knew she wasn't alone. Her community, both inside the hospital and beyond, was rallying behind her. And while she hadn't asked for this fight, she was ready to face it head-on. The pressure on the Chicago Police Department mounted with each passing hour. The viral video of Evelyn's arrest had ignited a firestorm, and the public demanded answers. Protesters continued to gather outside the precinct, their chants echoing through the streets as news crews captured every moment. Inside the station, officers scrambled to contain the fallout, but tensions were high. Officer Greg Lawson, who had been so confident in his actions earlier that morning, now found himself at the center of a growing scandal. Lawson sat slumped in a chair in the break room, staring blankly at the wall as he replayed the events in his mind. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong, that he was just following protocol. But deep down, doubt crept in. The video circulating online didn't show him in a favorable light. His dismissive tone, his refusal to verify Evelyn's identity, and his sarcastic remarks all painted a picture of someone far more interested in asserting authority than seeking justice. For the first time, Lawson felt uneasy about how things might play out. His partner, Officer Marks, wasn't faring much better. Sitting across from Lawson, Marks fidgeted nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Greg, I don't know if we handled this the right way," he said finally, breaking the tense silence. "She kept saying she was a doctor. Maybe we should have checked before bringing her in." Lawson shot him a glare, defensive and irritated. "What are you talking about? She fit the description. That's all that matters. You think I'm supposed to take her word over the report we got?" Marks hesitated, unsure how to respond. He knew Lawson's reputation for being tough, and often harsh, especially when it came to people of color. But something about this case felt different. Evelyn hadn't acted like a guilty person. She'd been calm, composed, and insistent on proving her innocence. And now, with the entire city watching, Marks couldn't shake the feeling that they'd made a terrible mistake. While the officers grappled with their roles in the incident, Marcus Carter was hard at work building a case against them. Back at his law office, Marcus pored over documents, piecing together evidence that would expose not only Lawson's misconduct, but also the systemic issues within the police department. Decades of experience had taught him that one bad apple could rot the whole barrel if left unchecked. This wasn't just about getting justice for Evelyn. It was about dismantling the biases that allowed such injustices to happen in the first place. Marcus reached out to witnesses who had seen the confrontation, including the bystander who recorded the video. One by one, they agreed to testify, eager to support Evelyn and hold the officers accountable. Meanwhile, Mr. Alan Peterson, the hospital administrator, provided written statements from staff members vouching for Evelyn's character and confirming her whereabouts during the alleged crime. Together, these pieces formed a compelling narrative. A respected professional had been targeted unfairly because of her race. Evelyn, still confined to the holding cell, remained unaware of the efforts unfolding on her behalf. Her thoughts drifted between frustration and determination. She thought about her patients, the lives she'd saved, the family she'd comforted, and wondered how anyone could look at her and see a criminal. Yet even in her darkest moments, she refused to let bitterness consume her. Instead, she focused on what she could control, her response to the injustice. Later that evening, Evelyn was finally released after hours of questioning, yielded no evidence tying her to the alleged theft. As she stepped out of the precinct, blinking in the bright lights of cameras, and surrounded by cheering supporters, she felt a mix of relief and resolve. Her father stood at the front of the crowd, his arms crossed, but his eyes filled with pride. Protest signs waved around her, bearing messages like "Stand with Evelyn" and "Accountability now." It was overwhelming, but also empowering. That night, Evelyn sat with Marcus in his study, discussing next steps. "We can file a lawsuit," Marcus explained, laying out the options. "But I want you to think carefully about what you want to achieve. Do you want compensation? Or do you want real change? Policy reforms, bias training, accountability measures?" Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Change," she said firmly. "This isn't just about me. If we don't address the root of the problem, someone else will go through this again. And I won't stand for that." Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "That's my girl," he said softly. "Let's get to work." As Evelyn prepared for the battle ahead, she realized that her arrest, though unjust, had given her a platform she never sought but couldn't ignore. People were listening, not just. The days following Evelyn's release from custody saw her story explode into a national conversation. What had started as a single viral video morphed into a movement, drawing attention to the pervasive issue of racial profiling in law enforcement. Social media played a pivotal role, amplifying voices that demanded accountability and justice. Protesters gathered daily outside the Chicago Police Department headquarters, their chants growing louder with each passing hour. Signs reading "Believe Black Women" and "Enough is Enough" lined the streets, while supporters shared stories of their own encounters with bias and discrimination. Local news outlets covered the protests extensively, airing interviews with community leaders, activists, and even some of Evelyn's colleagues from St. Vincent's Hospital. One segment featured Dr. Sarah Thompson, who spoke passionately about Evelyn's character and contributions to the medical field. "Evelyn is one of the most dedicated professionals I have ever met," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "To treat her like a suspect based on nothing more than her appearance is not only wrong, it's dangerous. It sends a message that Black women aren't valued or respected, no matter how much they achieve." As public outrage intensified, so did the pressure on city officials and the police department to act. The mayor held an emergency press conference, flanked by members of the city council and representatives from civil rights organizations. "This incident has exposed deep-rooted issues within our system," the mayor admitted, his tone somber but resolute. "We must address these problems head-on. Justice will be served, and reforms will follow." Behind the scenes, internal investigations were already underway. Body cam footage from both Officer Lawson and Officer Marks was reviewed meticulously, revealing stark contrasts in their behavior during the arrest. While Marks appeared hesitant and conflicted, Lawson's actions spoke volumes about his mindset. He ignored Evelyn's repeated requests to verify her identity, mocked her claims of being a doctor, and escalated the situation unnecessarily. The footage painted a damning picture of someone driven by prejudice rather than professionalism. Lawson, now under scrutiny, grew increasingly defensive. During questioning by internal affairs investigators, he doubled down on his initial stance, insisting that he followed protocol and acted on the information provided to him. "I didn't make assumptions because of her race," he argued, though his words lacked conviction. "I was doing my job." But the evidence told a different story. Witnesses corroborated Evelyn's account, describing how calm and cooperative she had been throughout the ordeal. Even Marks, feeling guilty for staying silent during the arrest, decided to come forward. In a private meeting with investigators, he admitted that Lawson's behavior went against proper procedure and basic human decency. Meanwhile, Evelyn found herself thrust into the spotlight, something she neither sought nor enjoyed. Reporters camped outside her home, hoping for a statement, while strangers flooded her social media accounts with messages of support. Though grateful for the solidarity, Evelyn struggled with the emotional toll of reliving the incident over and over again. She spent hours talking to her father, Marcus, about how to navigate this newfound attention without losing sight of her goals. "This isn't just about me," she reminded him. "It's about every person who's ever been treated unfairly because of the color of their skin. If my story can help spark change, then it's worth it." Determined to channel her frustration into action, Evelyn agreed to speak at a community rally organized by local activists. Standing before a crowd of thousands, she took a deep breath and began to share her experience. Her voice wavered at first, but as she spoke, it grew stronger. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated incident," she said, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "It's part of a pattern that needs to end. We deserve to live in a world where we're judged by our actions, not our appearances, where we're seen as equals, not suspects." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing through the streets of Chicago. For Evelyn, the moment was bittersweet. She knew the fight ahead would be long and difficult, but standing there, surrounded by people who believed in her cause, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Change wouldn't come overnight, but with persistence and unity, she believed it was possible. And she was ready to lead the charge. The investigation into Officer Greg Lawson's conduct quickly became a lightning rod for discussions about accountability within law enforcement. Internal Affairs released their findings after weeks of mounting public pressure, and the results were damning. Bodycam footage revealed not only Lawson's dismissive attitude toward Evelyn, but also a clear double standard in how he treated suspects based on race. In contrast, white individuals accused of similar offenses were often given the benefit of the doubt, with officers taking time to verify their identities and listen to their explanations. The disparity was impossible to ignore. Lawson's behavior during Evelyn's arrest stood out as particularly egregious. Not only had he refused to confirm her alibi despite multiple opportunities, but his sarcastic remarks, like questioning whether someone like her could truly be a doctor, sparked outrage even among his fellow officers. When confronted with the evidence, Lawson attempted to justify his actions by claiming that he was simply following protocol. However, investigators noted that his interpretation of protocol seemed to shift depending on the suspect's appearance, exposing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Faced with overwhelming proof of misconduct, the police department suspended Lawson without pay pending further disciplinary hearings. His partner, Officer Marks, faced no formal punishment, though he was required to undergo additional training on implicit bias and de-escalation tactics. Marks cooperated fully with the investigation, providing candid testimony about Lawson's aggressive demeanor and refusal to consider alternative approaches during the arrest. While some criticized Marks for not speaking up sooner, others acknowledged the difficult position he'd been in and praised him for eventually coming forward. Meanwhile, Marcus Carter filed a lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department on behalf of Evelyn. The legal complaint outlined not only the personal harm caused by Lawson's actions, but also the systemic failures that allowed such incidents to occur repeatedly. The lawsuit sought damages for emotional distress and reputational harm, but more importantly, it called for sweeping reforms. Among the proposed changes were mandatory bias training programs, increased transparency in police procedures, and the implementation of independent oversight boards to review cases of alleged misconduct. City officials, eager to quell public anger and restore trust, agreed to negotiate a settlement. After weeks of intense discussions, they reached an agreement that included a significant financial payout for Evelyn and her family. However, what set this settlement apart was its focus on structural change. The city committed to allocating funds for community policing initiatives aimed at fostering better relationships between law enforcement and marginalized communities. They also pledged to install body cameras on all officers and establish stricter guidelines for handling cases involving vague suspect descriptions. Evelyn testified before city council members during a special hearing on police reform. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, she spoke with quiet authority, her words carrying the weight of someone who had lived through injustice firsthand. "This isn't just about me," she emphasized, addressing the packed room. "It's about every person who has ever been judged guilty before proven innocent. It's about dismantling systems that perpetuate inequality. If we want true justice, we need real change, not just apologies or temporary fixes." Her testimony resonated deeply, earning applause from attendees and prompting several council members to pledge their support for reform efforts. Outside the hearing, protesters cheered as Evelyn emerged, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Dr. Carter, and change starts now." For many, Evelyn had become a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that standing up against injustice could lead to meaningful progress. Though the road ahead remained long, Evelyn felt a sense of cautious optimism. She knew that systemic racism wouldn't disappear overnight, but the momentum generated by her case gave her faith that change was possible. With her father by her side and a growing coalition of supporters behind her, she vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved to live in a fairer, more equitable world. The settlement reached between Evelyn and the Chicago Police Department marked a turning point, not just for her, but for the city as a whole. While the financial compensation was substantial, it was the policy changes that truly stood out. The agreement included measures to address systemic racism within law enforcement, such as mandatory bias training for all officers, increased accountability through independent oversight boards, and clear guidelines for handling vague suspect descriptions. These reforms were designed to prevent incidents like Evelyn's from happening again, though everyone involved knew there was still much work to be done. Officer Greg Lawson's disciplinary hearing became a highly publicized event, drawing attention from both local and national media. Witnesses testified about his pattern of discriminatory behavior, including past complaints filed by citizens who felt they had been unfairly targeted because of their race. Marks also took the stand, recounting the events of Evelyn's arrest and expressing regret for not intervening sooner. His testimony painted a stark picture of Lawson's refusal to consider alternative explanations or show basic respect for those he encountered on duty. In the end, Lawson was fired from the police force, a decision met with cheers from protesters outside the courthouse. For many, it was a small yet significant victory, a sign that accountability was possible, even in cases involving powerful institutions. However, Evelyn knew that firing one officer wasn't enough. "This isn't just about one bad apple," she told reporters after the verdict was announced. "It's about changing the system that allows bad apples to thrive. We have to keep pushing for real, lasting reform." As the dust settled, Evelyn found herself grappling with mixed emotions. On one hand, she felt relief that justice had been served, at least partially. On the other, she couldn't shake the lingering frustration of knowing how easily things could have gone differently. What if she hadn't been a doctor? What if no one had recorded the incident? Would anyone have believed her then? These questions weighed heavily on her mind, fueling her determination to use her platform to help others. Evelyn began working closely with civil rights organizations to advocate for broader societal change. She joined panels, attended rallies, and spoke at schools and community centers, sharing her story and urging people to get involved in the fight against racial injustice. Her message was simple but powerful. Silence is complicity. If you see something wrong, speak up. If you feel unseen or unheard, demand to be acknowledged. Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Her father, Marcus Carter, remained by her side throughout this journey, offering guidance and support. Though proud of what they had accomplished, he reminded Evelyn that systemic change required patience and persistence. "We've taken a step forward," he told her one evening as they sat together in his study. "But there are miles to go. Don't lose sight of why we started this fight. To make life better for everyone, not just ourselves." Evelyn nodded, absorbing his words. She understood that the road ahead would be long and challenging, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Across Chicago and beyond, people were waking up to the realities of racial profiling and demanding action. From grassroots movements to legislative efforts, momentum was building, and Evelyn intended to stay at the forefront of it. One particularly memorable moment came when she addressed a group of high school students during a career day event. Standing in front of a packed auditorium, Evelyn shared her journey, from growing up as the daughter of a civil rights attorney to becoming a surgeon and now an advocate for justice. She encouraged the students to dream big and never let setbacks define them. "Life will throw challenges your way," she said, her voice steady and inspiring. "But don't let fear or doubt stop you from pursuing what matters most. You have the power to shape the future." The applause that followed was thunderous, a testament to the impact Evelyn was having on those around her. As she walked off stage, several students approached her, eager to ask questions and thank her for her courage. In that moment, Evelyn realized that her story wasn't just about her. It was about inspiring others to believe in themselves and their ability to make a difference. Though the scars of her experience would always remain, Evelyn chose to focus on the positives, the connections she'd made, the lives she'd touched, and the progress she'd helped spark. Justice might not have been perfect, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start was all you needed to build something extraordinary. Months after the incident that changed her life, Evelyn stood on a stage at Lincoln Park High School, looking out at a sea of young faces eager to hear what she had to say. The auditorium buzzed with energy as students leaned forward in their seats, some scribbling notes, others whispering excitedly to one another. For many of them, this was more than just another assembly. It was a chance to learn from someone who had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger because of it. Evelyn adjusted the microphone, her presence commanding yet warm. She began by sharing her journey, not shying away from the challenges she'd faced along the way. "Growing up, I learned early on that life isn't always fair," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But fairness isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. You have to fight for it, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against you." She recounted the morning of her arrest, describing how it felt to be judged not by her actions or achievements, but by assumptions based on her appearance. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, especially the students of color who nodded knowingly, their expressions reflecting a shared understanding of what it meant to carry the weight of stereotypes. But Evelyn didn't dwell on bitterness or anger. Instead, she focused on resilience and purpose. "I could have let that day break me," she admitted, pausing to let her words sink in. "But I chose to see it as an opportunity, to speak up, to stand tall, and to remind myself and others that our voices matter. Each of you has a voice too. Use it, whether it's in your classroom, your neighborhood, or someday on a bigger stage. Don't be afraid to advocate for what's right." As she spoke, Evelyn emphasized the importance of education and self-belief. She encouraged the students to pursue their passions relentlessly, no matter how daunting the obstacles might seem. "There will be people who doubt you," she said, her tone firm but encouraging. "People who tell you that you don't belong or that you can't succeed. Don't listen to them. Listen to yourself. Believe in your potential, because the world needs what only you can offer." Her speech wasn't just about overcoming personal struggles. It was also a call to action. Evelyn urged the students to get involved in their communities, whether through volunteering, activism, or simply being kind to those around them. "Change starts small," she explained. "It begins with conversations, with standing up for someone who's being treated unfairly, or with challenging ideas that divide us instead of unite us. Every act of courage matters." When she finished speaking, the room erupted into applause, the sound echoing off the walls. Students lined up afterward to ask questions and share their thoughts, many expressing gratitude for her honesty and encouragement. One girl approached shyly, clutching a notebook. "Thank you for telling your story," she said softly. "I want to be a lawyer someday, but sometimes I feel like I'm not good enough. Hearing you talk made me think maybe I can do it too." Evelyn smiled warmly, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "You absolutely can," she replied. "And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're wrong. Trust me, you're capable of amazing things." Later that evening, as Evelyn walked home under the glow of Chicago's city lights, she reflected on how far she'd come since that fateful morning. The scars of the experience would always remain, but they had become part of her story, a reminder of both the pain and the progress she'd witnessed. Though systemic racism still loomed large, Evelyn took comfort in knowing that change was happening, one step at a time. She thought about the students she'd met that day, their bright eyes full of hope and determination. They were the future, the ones who would carry the torch long after she was gone. And while the fight for justice was far from over, Evelyn knew it was in good hands. Standing on the edge of Lake Michigan, watching the waves crash against the shore, Evelyn felt a quiet sense of peace. She had started as a doctor saving lives in an operating room, but now she was doing something equally important, inspiring others to believe in themselves and their ability to make the world a better place. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them, not just for herself, but for everyone counting on her to keep pushing forward.